Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to us today, and we hope that the session will be very advantageous. Feel free to ask questions in the chat window. Probably would be the most effective way to do it. We've got some folks that'll be there to answer them in real time. So we'll be glad to follow up with you as well. At the end, we have some contact information for folks you can reach out to. So feel free to reach out if you do want to have additional discussions and additional information. So as far as the agenda, what we're going to talk about today is really just introduce Ribbon Communications and what we offer. We know that a lot of folks probably aren't familiar with Ribbon as much as we would like, and what we want to do is take some time today to introduce the company and what we do, and then we'll talk about a couple products as well that should be of interest to any co-op or any electric company that wants to get into servicing communications or delivering communications type services to their end customers. So we'll focus on a couple of those services that we offer and talk about those in a little bit more detail. So Ribbon Communications was actually created in October of 2017, and it was created with the merger of a company called Genband and a company called Sonus Networks. And I don't know if anybody has heard of those. Hopefully you have. Both of those companies have been around since probably around 2000. And both of those companies prior to the merger in 2017 had done some merger activity on their own. And some of those companies you probably have heard of. For example, Genband acquired back in 2010, or actually the end of 2009, some assets from Nortel, or what used to be called Nortel Networks. They were a big player in the telecom industry for a long, long time. And Sonus Networks actually did some acquisitions as well, a company called Performance Technologies, and in 2016, a company called Taqua. So both Genband and Sonus have in their portfolio, the combined Ribbon portfolio, both companies have brought together a very nice complementary set of products that we'll talk about a little bit over time here. But Ribbon as a company itself has done a good job of doing acquisitions and doing their own complementing to the product portfolio. Back in 2018, Ribbon acquired a company called Edgewater Networks, which brought to the table edge devices that can be used for various types of functionality, typically on an enterprise, and then Anova, which was a company that provided some data technology that helped us build and enhance our analytics portfolio that we'll talk about. So as you'll see, Ribbon as a company has been around a long time via its acquisitions and has a very wide portfolio as a result. One of the other acquisitions that we'll be completing here soon, hopefully, is an acquisition that was announced at the end of 2019. Ribbon is set to acquire a company called ECI, which ECI brings to the table packet and optical transport solutions. So that helps the portfolio because Ribbon has been focused, you'll hear us say, from the core to the edge, meaning the core components of a network like the call controllers and things like that, to the edge, which is typically equipment that would sit on a customer's location. And with the ECI acquisition, we feel like we'll now have the ability to tie all of that equipment together with our own packet and optical transport solutions. So from a rural electric company that may be looking to get into the business of doing hosted services, we now have the ability to not only provide the core and the edge and services that can be delivered from the core or the edge, but also the ability to tie everything together with our optical and packet transport solution. So hopefully you'll see the final acquisition and consolidation notice over the next few days. So we're hopeful that that'll be done here shortly. And what that'll create is, when the acquisition is finished, a company that has a combined annual revenue of over $900 million. So we're not really a small company, And that's also shown in the fact that we're in over 140 companies or countries throughout the world. So we have lots of products and lots of countries that we do business in. And about 4,000 employees globally. So we're a very good sized company, and we feel like our portfolio reflects that. Some places that you'll find us, Ribbon may not be a household name at this point, since it's really just sort of a new name of a couple previous companies, but our products are in lots and lots of areas throughout the world. The one most folks are familiar with who do know about Ribbon or some of its predecessors is in the service provider market. And I say service provider in the sense that communications companies typically, electric companies now like yourselves are getting into the business of providing voice type services. So in a sense, you folks are a service provider, obviously for electric services, but also for communications as well. But we also work with software vendor companies, cable companies, lots of different companies that are interested in providing real-time communications using technology in various forms. So you'll find us in all different types and sizes of communications companies throughout the world. And when I say all different types in North America, for example, AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, big companies like that, all the way down to very small, what we call independent companies. And we've been focused for a long time on the independent market. And Elizabeth, that's on the call, is in charge of actually the independent operating company segment of Ribbon. So we have a sales team that focuses specifically on municipalities, small wireless carriers, the mom and pop telephone companies, as well as the rural electric companies. So we're very focused in that segment, as well as the larger segments of the service provider market in general across the world. We're also in large enterprises and small enterprises as well. So things like banks, universities, airlines, hotels, city government, state government. We have lots of different deployments in those types of enterprises. And we have products that are geared towards enterprises specifically, and we work with channels and distribution partners in a lot of cases with those enterprise companies, but you'd be surprised where we have our services, and our services are resold through a lot of those resellers and channel partners to a lot of big companies. And then we also have a large presence in the federal government. So you see on the chart here, we've got lots of deployments with Department of Defense locations, various military bases, and we actually have our application server functioning for the Pentagon and use in various services delivered to the Pentagon. So we have services and we deliver services in lots of different areas throughout the world, governments, enterprises, as well as all different types of service providers. And Ribbon focuses on certain areas, and all of these areas are tied together by a couple key themes. One is an end-to-end solution focus. And what we mean by that is we try to focus, as I mentioned earlier, from the core to the edge, meaning that we have products and services that work everywhere from the core of the network where your call controllers are done, or your application server may reside, or your subscribers' clients may register to, all the way to a customer's location, maybe behind a private branch exchange or a PBX, or some type of a phone system that would be located at a small business or a larger enterprise. So we want to try to focus and deliver services and products that go all the way from the end and your end user all the way to the core of the network where it hits the rest of the world. And obviously that can create a lot of value because you have one company that can provide a very broad portfolio of products and services across a wide range of markets. And also we're focused on cost savings. And you'll see, and we'll talk about in a couple minutes here, the fact that we have services now that utilize the cloud. And if you're not familiar with the cloud, essentially what that is sort of an industry buzz term at the moment, where a lot of the services that are delivered in this nebulous cloud that can be either in the public domain, or it can be a private cloud that a company owns and uses to deliver services by itself. But to the end user, it's essentially a service delivery vehicle that appears and allows them to use services that are offered by a service provider. So the result is cost savings are made because providers like yourself don't have to own the material, don't have to manage and operate the system. That's done by the service provider via the cloud. So it's a much more economical way to provide services to your customer base, because you don't essentially have to be in the business of running and managing your own networks. So the focus areas up on top, SaaS, or software as a solution, and IP transformation. That's the idea of taking existing networks in a lot of communications providers that they may have today and transforming them to an IP network infrastructure. And that whole migration has been going on for a long time now, and you folks are probably familiar with that because you're in the business of delivering electric and then adding on services on top of that. So you're interested in providing high-speed internet services and ideally overlaying voice services on top of that. So you're actually in the business of transforming the network from whatever's there today that your end customer may be using to an IP type solution that can deliver lots of different advanced services and functionality. And then the enterprise edge, I mentioned that. Lots of services that are geared towards large and small business customers, lots of different calling functionality, multimedia capability, mobility type services. All of those type capabilities are targeted towards subscribers, more on the enterprise side, but a lot of those can actually be used on the residential side as well, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes as well. So service insights and assurance, that's the analytics that I mentioned earlier. Analytics is another big buzzword in the industry right now. And essentially what analytics means is taking data from various devices on the network, using that data to formulate responses or a feedback mechanism to make policy changes or to make adjustments in the network to optimize and to secure and things like that in a network. So it's basically using data that's ingested to create feedback to optimize and secure the network as needed. And then from a security perspective, obviously everybody knows about security. Even if you're not in the industry, I know folks have heard about robocalls and call blocking and spam calls and that sort of thing. That's, again, another big focus area for us because the FCC actually came out with a ruling at the end of 2019 that talked about something called stir shaken. And I won't really get into that, but it's actually a ruling that is essentially forcing service providers to be able to validate phone numbers on calls and validate the validity of calls that are entering into the network, and when they're delivered, have the ability to display whether that number has been changed or the number has been spoofed. And there's a lot of focus in the industry right now on reducing and mitigating a lot of the trust factors that have been corrupted by spam calls and by things like that. So security is a big focus area for us because it's really a response to a problem with all of the nuisance calls that have been going on and growing over the last few years. So our portfolio is on this busy chart here, and I won't go through it in detail, but I will talk to some parts of it. Across the top, you'll see some bubbles, And there's ones labeled fixed, mobile, and MSO. A fixed network is essentially a network that residential type subscribers would typically use, or subscribers that aren't using a wireless network. So where we sell and where we have a lot of deployments, and a lot of our focus is on fixed networks, which is typically what you would be deploying for subscribers to be able to communicate from whether it's a phone on somebody's desk or a phone hanging on the wall. That's an example of a fixed network utilization. And then mobile subscribers, we have products that are focused on the mobile market or the wireless market. So folks like AT&T and Verizon Wireless and people like that, they have specific requirements for various types of functionality to allow the fixed network to talk to the mobile network, and for the mobile network to be able to use data effectively. And then the MSOs, a multi-service operator, those can be people like cable companies, internet service providers, various types of what we call over-the-top providers who may essentially have apps that ride over anybody's broadband connection. So we've got services and the ability to provide and add value to those types of networks as well with various products. And then interconnect on the right-hand side, that's essentially companies that provide interconnect capability, or carriers that actually deliver traffic between companies. So you may have your company, for example, may want to deliver service out to the rest of the world. So typically you'll sign a contract with some sort of an interconnect carrier. Nowadays they may be an IP carrier, but some sort of an interconnect carrier that will haul the traffic that's on your network out to the rest of the world and then feed traffic to you from the rest of the world. And each of those have different requirements, and each of those essentially can utilize different parts of our portfolio. So on the left-hand side, you'll see call controllers and app servers. These are typically referred to as core components of the network. And the reason for that is the call controllers and the app servers are essentially what subscribers register to. So back in the olden days, when you picked up your phone and you heard a dial tone, you were actually getting that from the switch that was located a few miles away. In the case of core controllers, it's very similar for the most part. In the IP world, you have the ability to register with a call server or an app server, and the feature set that the phone can deliver is generally controlled by the call controller or the app server, but those devices live in the core of the network. And as we'll talk about in a couple minutes here, Unified Communications as a Service is essentially a way to deliver those types of capabilities, the call controller and the app server capabilities, via the cloud. Media gateways are gateways that live in the network and essentially convert from one technology to another. So for example, they might be some sort of an IP protocol on one side, and then on the other side they may be talking a traditional what we call time division multiplexing protocol, or TDM protocol. So the need for media gateways is really dependent upon your network and the type of subscribers that you're going after and want to serve. And then SBCs, or session border controllers, policy, and edge. That third box refers to what we call session border controllers, which I'll talk about towards the end here. But essentially, they're devices that control and manage routing policies, security rules, things like that for IP traffic. So typically you'll have a session border controller at the edge of your network, and it may be talking to another session border controller at the edge of your interconnect carrier's network, or at the edge of an enterprise you may be connected to, or at the edge of the cloud that you may be connected to that would be providing you service. So it's essentially a demarcation point in an IP network. And then we have some products called EdgeMark, which are devices that are designed to be put on a customer's prem that can provide not only session border control capability and not only policy, but also some other capabilities as well. And then from a policy perspective, we have essentially a server that can live in the network and provide centralized routing intelligence. So rather than having intelligence built into each one of these separate nodes to take the digits that are dialed and translate that into where the call needs to be routed to, you can actually have some pretty sophisticated rules set up with our policy server and do it in a centralized fashion so that you don't have to manage each of the devices in the network separately. And then down on the bottom, the management, security, analytics, and CPaaS and UCaaS. Those are essentially management elements that are specifically focused on analytics and what we call Kandy, which is our cloud platform portfolio, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then EdgeView is the management application that manages EdgeMark devices that are deployed in the customer's prem. Okay, so that's a very high level, very quick overview of the Ribbon portfolio.
Hey Jeff, Lance here. I just wanted to remind the audience, just quick break-in. Feel free to ask us any questions if we're going through some material and you have a more detailed question about something Jeff's covering. Bottom right of your screen, or you may see a question mark. Click on that and you can ask us a question at any time. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Lance. Yeah, good point. As far as software is concerned, I'm going to focus on two products that we deliver via the cloud or typically cloud-based. One of them is called Kandy, and Kandy is essentially a software platform that offers what we call as a service. And if you're familiar with the communications industry at all, that's another one of those industry buzzwords. You'll hear folks say AAS or as a service. And you'll hear, folks talk about communications as a service or platforms as a service or security as a service, that sort of thing. And essentially what that means is it takes this whole idea of providing functionality and moving it to the cloud, and then that cloud can deliver the service to an end user without the service provider needing to manage and operate the network. So it's a much more efficient way of delivering services. It's got a lot of advantages, and we'll talk about some of those, but we'll talk about Kandy in a little bit because that's really a growth area for the company, this whole cloud communications platform. And then analytics is the other big area for us, and analytics really deals with security, network intelligence, and the ability ultimately to take data and monetize it. By using things like machine learning and artificial intelligence to help companies like yourself not only secure your network, but optimize the network, as well as even without the voice network, looking at a data network, for example, helping you to develop different targeted strategies for advertising or for marketing programs or for features and services that may play well within your network based on the analytics that you're seeing from the customers in the network. So both of those tools are very powerful. So let's talk about Kandy in a little more detail. So again, this is Ribbon's portfolio of cloud-based services. And you can see in the middle there, within the pink circle, there's something called CPaaS, or Communications Platform as a Service. Essentially what that represents is Ribbon's products, our application server, our session border controller, and some other products put together and deployed in public clouds throughout the world. And those clouds can essentially be accessed and provide service to your end users. So you don't have to worry as a service provider about managing your network, buying the equipment, upgrading it when it's required, maintaining it, that sort of thing. You essentially can purchase seats, offer that service, and then deliver services to your end users that way. So it's a very feature-rich and optimal way to get into business quickly, offering voice services using this Kandy type platform. There are what are called APIs, application programming interfaces, on the system, so there can be integration with CRM tools, customer relationship management tools, various types of third-party applications for provisioning and management, and various third-party devices can be interfaced. And then it's all tied together with the pink ring, which is the provisioning portal. And I've got a slide that talks about that, but essentially that's a portal, that's a web browser interfaced portal that you as a service provider can use to manage the services and the features and administer the customers that you have, but it can also be used by the end user to manage the services that you have sold them. So they can go and manage their screening lists and their voicemail messages and record new voicemail messages and, do things like that. So it makes it easy for subscribers to do their own thing with the services that you've offered to them. On the bottom right there where it says turnkey applications, I won't talk about this a whole lot of detail, but we do have some applications that have been pre-developed that can be utilized for what I would consider to be special applications. Things like visual attendant, which is more of an auto attendant type feature for web pages, or live support, which is more of a customer support center that can be that can use this type of service, and those services can use things like digital cognitive analysis, or DCA, which is the ability to essentially have automated questions and responses based on what customers ask. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with getting on a website and seeing a little window pop up that says, hey, can I help you? And you put in a question and then there may be a response back. That's an example of a bot or a DCA, digital cognitive analysis interface, where you're talking to a computer that's essentially trying to answer your question or get your question such that it can be turned over to a live support person if in fact that's required. So we do have some pre-packaged applications for that we offer as well. The main part we're going to talk about here, though, is above that, UCaaS, which is Unified Communications as a Service. And as the name implies, it's communications as a service that are being delivered through the cloud. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail, but what the customer would actually use is on the bottom left there where it says clients. One of the key things with this type of service is clients that are used by an end user. And a client can be an IP phone that's sitting on the desk or hanging on the wall or, wherever. But then you also have the ability to put applications on a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop, and those particular devices now can be used as communications devices, not only for voice but also for lots of different multimedia applications. So the clients are very important because that's actually the user interface that your customers would use when they go to make calls or do any of the multimedia capability. So looking a little closer at what UCaaS is, it's a white-labeled, multi-tenant, carrier-grade solution. And what we mean by white label is it's not branded. It can be branded by you as the provider. It can be branded by somebody you may sell to that they may resell. You can essentially change the look and feel of that client so it looks like a product that you've developed and you've offered. And the system is designed to allow multiple tenants, meaning that multiple organizations, multiple companies. It can be striated such that lots of different organizations can use the system, but to them it looks like their own system. And then, of course, it's carrier grade, which builds on Ribbon's strong point, the ability to have what we call 5 nines of reliability, where you have redundancy and backup systems, active primary and backup systems, that sort of thing. Carrier grade, meaning you're up 99.999% of the time. The service is targeted at residential, small, medium business, and even enterprises. So we've got folks that use this from the gamut. We've got large companies like the City of Los Angeles and universities and hospitals and rental car companies and auto part companies and people like that use it, all the way down to small rural service providers that are using it for their own internal use. So it's widely deployed. It's widely deployed across the spectrum of users, and it can be used effectively from everybody from residential subscribers who may not use a very extensive feature set to large enterprises that may use lots of the capabilities that are offered. And then I talked about the portal. I'll skip over that one. And the clients, I talked about those as well. Really, this whole UCaaS discussion is really something that could be a total separate hour or two discussion if we wanted to get into it. But just understand that the portal and the clients that are available are very important, and we do have a very rich set of portal functionality for management as well as clients for the end users to actually use depending upon which type and device they want to use. And then lastly, we also feel like we differentiate ourselves because we have support programs in place to help your team market and sell the services. And I've got a chart that talks about this in a little bit more detail, but what we run into a lot of times is service providers that say, yeah, this is really great technology. Yeah, I would like to get into the business, but I don't know how to sell it. I don't know how to put it together. I don't know who buys what. I need some help marketing it, that sort of thing. So we have programs in place and a team in place to actually help with those types of things. So it's very effective when you bundle this capability with the support programs we offer. We find you get a lot more, a higher take rate as well as much more effective what we call stickiness, meaning that when you bundle multiple services together, customers like it a whole lot better and it's harder for them to leave. So as far as deployments are concerned, there's a couple different ways this can be deployed. I'm going to start on the bottom right. And essentially the bottom right is probably what a lot of electric companies like yourselves would want to get into if you're offering voice services for the first time. And that's what I've labeled new deployment. And what I mean by that is you can use the Kandy UCaaS cloud to host the services for your subscribers and then just utilize your existing broadband infrastructure to deliver those services. So it may mean putting an IP phone in somebody's home, using the broadband access that you're deployed, or in the case of somebody that may have an old copper phone that's not even an IP phone, there are terminal adapters available that can be used and placed in a home to essentially allow the old phone to be able to be used with the broadband access connection. But essentially in a new deployment, you're essentially reselling those Kandy services to your subscriber base and you're delivering that over your broadband access network. In the middle there where it says out of territory, that essentially gives you the ability to go outside of the footprint of your company and deliver services to folks that may be outside of the footprint. And this becomes important, especially in businesses where you may have a campus with multiple locations or a bank that has multiple locations and maybe 2 branches are in your area and 1 branch is in the next town over that you don't service. You have the ability to go out of territory and utilize actually anybody's broadband connection, and that can all be tied together because all of those lines and all of those customers are registered to the Kandy cloud. So regardless of where they are or what type of device they're using, the dialing plan can be the same for all of them. And then over on the left, where it says augment existing network, I know some companies have looked at getting into the business by purchasing communications companies. I know of one example up in Virginia. So in a case like that, you may run into a company that has some of these core elements already, like in this case, the C15, which is one of our core controllers. So essentially, Kandy can be used to deliver those same type services, but you're augmenting that capability and utilizing what you have on site for other functionalities. For example, in this case, the C15 would be the vehicle to get traffic to the rest of the world. You wouldn't have to use the Kandy cloud to get to the rest of the world. You can essentially have the traffic go back through the existing network and utilize those existing agreements and that existing equipment. So net result is there's lots of different ways to deploy a UCaaS solution, lots of different models. what may work for you may not work for the next, and we can do variations of these as well. It really depends upon the specifics of your company. But again, the key message with all of this is Kandy UCaaS allows you to deliver residential voice features and business voice features for any business customers you want to go after using your existing infrastructure. And that's important because essentially, again, you want to go to market fast, you want to economically and optimally offer services to customers, so you have the ability to set up bundles and target specific groups of customers using the vast array of features that are available in the Kandy cloud. And I didn't list them all here. I just put a couple that are more popular, but there's lots and lots of features that are available and that can be put into bundles that you can then in turn resell to your residential and business customers. All right, this chart shows a view of the portal that I was talking about, and you can see down on the bottom there's a couple different screenshots. It's sort of an eye test, but the point with this chart is the portal that we have is browser-based, so anybody with a web browser can get access to it, and you have the ability to essentially deliver self-administration services to various types of portal users. So for example, an end user may have the ability to manage some of the services that you offer to them, and it's essentially a subset of the portal that a department or a site manager may use. An organizational admin may have additional capabilities, or the company itself may have master capability to manage all of the customers that are off of that are being serviced. So you essentially have the ability to partition capabilities and to, again, white label and brand the portal, and then allow customers to manage just the services sets that you offer them. So it's very efficient, and it deloads your folks from having to do a lot of that administration capability. Marketing programs are available, like I mentioned earlier. Again, there's different areas and there's lots of different capabilities that are available, but Ribbon offers everything from consulting for what we call go-to-market or GTM type services, where we'll help you package and develop programs for the services you want to offer for your target customer markets, develop project plans and tools and that sort of thing. We also have a marketing portal that's available for our partners, and there's lots of different content on the portal, everything from collateral, so solution briefs, business cases, advertising, scripts for advertising, bill stuffers, things like that. Lots of different capabilities from a marketing perspective that you can take advantage of to help, again, sell the services. And then we also have the ability to work with you to develop different campaigns and put in different types of content. So, we can develop campaigns over social media, in newsletters, in bills, in newspapers, radio advertisements, television, that sort of thing. And then we also have the ability to pull in various go-to-market partners that we have. We work with companies like Bradio and Fable for things like training, so things like end-user training and even just basic telephony training for your salespeople. Those are things that are available and can be delivered via this marketing program or some of these marketing programs that I'm talking about here. All right, let's talk about analytics. And analytics are very important because, regardless of the company that you're running, customer satisfaction, efficiency, security, and then innovation are typical things that most companies really want to focus on. Like obviously customer satisfaction, drives things like, and analytics can be used to drive things like faster problem resolution, often before the customer even knows there's an issue. And I know you guys can identify that because, if the power's out in the middle of the night, generally folks aren't calling in, but you want to try to correct those issues before you get calls. So essentially, the analytics are a way to identify and resolve problems a whole lot quicker, which in turn reduces customer churn, because if you have a happy customer, they have less of a reason to transfer to another company. As far as efficiency is concerned, you obviously want to avoid service disruptions. You want to have intelligent network planning. And in the case of communications, that's important because you don't want to deny service when customers need that. So you don't want to have routes, or you want to make sure you have enough session capacity so that when you have customers making a call at 10 o'clock in the morning, if they're a business customer, you want to have the ability for all of those customers to complete their calls without any kind of blocking. So operational efficiency is a very important part of analytics, making sure that your network is sized correctly and you have routes sufficiently planned and sized. And then from a security perspective, you want to be able to secure the network, detect and mitigate any threats to the network, be it from fraud, be it from hackers who may get into the system, but the ability to use analytics to see in real time whether things like that are happening on the network is very valuable to folks who manage the network. And then lastly, being able to take those products and based on the usage of the services that you offer, be able to personalize promotions and marketing and advertising activity. So it makes it very easy to target those dollars you want to spend on those types of things to services that your customers are using or services that your customers seem to want. And analytics, again, can provide that type of capability. So Ribbon's portfolio is really broken out into a couple different areas. Down at the bottom, you see a box called Protect. Protect is actually the application or the data gathering application that absorbs all of this feedback from the various devices. So it's a centralized system, and it gathers in all of the different input from the various devices that it's monitoring. And then there's applications that ride on top of Protect that are focused on operations, security, and monetization. And from our expertise, we focus on developing applications and developing the expertise in those what we call pillars of our analytics portfolio. So if you look at what those pillars really represent from an operations perspective, it's network operations, network management, the quality of experience, customer care type things. And keep in mind, this isn't necessarily something that you would need with voice. I mean, you can use this for a fiber-only deployment where you have high-speed internet only. You can obviously use that to still gather marketing intelligence, to gather and look at fraud prevention, look at denial of service or other types of hacking events, and be able to report on those types of capabilities and be able to mitigate those types of threats very quickly. So these types of focuses aren't just geared towards voice, so kind of keep that in mind as well. So when we look at how this really should work and where we feel like the value of analytics comes in, it's really in three different areas: visibility, analytics, and action. And what I mean by visibility is for both your voice network and your IP network, you have the ability to monitor lots of different devices. And obviously all of these won't apply to everybody's network, but potentially you will have voice, you will have internet, you may have some security type applications that you're offering, maybe even some Internet of Things or IoT where you're monitoring, cameras or, things like that. And then probably not so much 5G wireless, but various types of interfaces and devices throughout the network can be viewed and essentially can provide data to the analytics platform. So when we look at the Protect platform that we just talked about, it's doing things like incident management, ingesting the data that's being received from all of these different devices, doing data aggregation and enrichment and then mitigation, and it's producing not only reports for key performance indicators and things like that, but it's also doing things like root cause analysis and developing most probable causes. That's important because the final step is where you can actually use that information to take action. So you can take the key performance indicators or the information and incidents that are being reported and put them into some sort of a policy change or some sort of a utilization of resource change so that you can do things like cost optimization, you can mitigate incidents that may be seen on the network, and in real time you can develop actions that can be fed back to those sensor devices. So you may see a route that's blocked up or a route that's down and it can't see traffic. So then based on the analytics that are being fed to the system can automatically say, okay, I want your session border controller to turn off that route and route all of the traffic to an alternate route because the one all the traffic's supposed to go to is blocked. So that would be just a general example of the type of action that you can do automatically using the data that's provided by analytics. All right, talking about core to edge security. I mentioned session border controller a couple times, and we'll talk about that briefly here. So a session border controller is a product that Ribbon has had for a long time, and session border controllers are used to control and secure real-time networks at the border. So you've probably saw in a couple slides where you see a session border controller and it's talking to the cloud, for example, with UCaaS. A session border controller is really used as a demarcation point at the edge of a network to control the VoIP traffic that's traversing it. And because it can control that, it can do things like introduce encryption and policies that can be enforced, and it can provide security capabilities, and it has the ability to do things like inner working and normalization because it's typically talking to another network or another person's network. So think of it as sort of the traffic cop for voice over IP services. So where you typically see them is both in the core of the network as well as at the edge of the network. And this, again, is another eye test chart. But I want you to kind of look and see that the session border controller plays a big role. On the left-hand side with the interconnect, this would be a very basic scenario where you would want to pass traffic from your network to somebody else's network. So you have voice over IP network and they need to make a call to AT&T in some far off area. Typically, if it's an IP connection, you're going to route the traffic over your session border controller to a far end session border controller. So you're essentially protecting and demarking your network at that session border controller. But then you also have the ability to use session border controllers to reach deeper into a customer's network. So on the bottom right-hand side where you see that access block, you'll see a couple session border controllers there between branch locations of an enterprise, or on the bottom left-hand side, you'll see an IAD, which is an integrated access device. That device can have session border control capability as well. So again, you're demarking your network to a customer's network and providing that session border controller type capability at a residence or in an enterprise type application as well. So typically it's a matter of trust as to whether they're deployed and where they're deployed and that sort of thing. But nowadays, it's just as easy to hack somebody's, network at their home as it is in a lot of cases for a large enterprise. So you have to kind of be vigilant, not only on the interconnect side of the network, but also on the access side. So essentially, everybody knows providing voice services can be a challenge, just like there's a separate set of challenges on providing electric to rural customers. Providing voice services can be a challenge as well because when you have customers and you don't know the type of devices that they have deployed, but they're talking to your network, that lack of customer visibility in a lot of cases provides or create some issues. And you obviously don't want to roll trucks to customers' locations, every time there's an issue, because that costs a lot of money. And when you have lots of devices, you have potential for inconsistent configuration of those devices. You have potential for limited interoperability if folks go and buy phones from Walmart and try to hook them up to your network and they don't function like they're supposed to. So it results in high support costs and security vulnerabilities. So those are things you have to think about when you offer these types of services or voice type services to any type of subscriber, be it a subscriber that's using your core network or somebody that's using a cloud-based network. So one of the ways to deal with that is what Ribbon calls network edge orchestration. And the orchestration involves the ability to put smart devices that are on customers' prems, and there's various types of devices that we offer, but those devices do things like session border control capability, they provide for security, they provide routing, they provide analytics, and they can even be set up to do things like survivability, so that if your high-speed connection would go down, for example, folks can still make calls back and forth between the phones that are on the device. So there's lots of capabilities that can be delivered and managed at the customer's prem, but what this allows is a device that you can manage using what we call EdgeView Service Control Center to essentially have analytics for those edge devices that you may have deployed within the network. So you can do all types of troubleshooting, you can gather information, you can manage those devices from the EdgeView service, and it makes it much easier to see where the bad actors are on the network, if it's a specific device, if it's in the customer's home and they've got a network and they have got a device that's not functioning correctly, you can see that, or if there's an issue with the broadband connection, that'll show up right away. So it's very useful in terms of securing as well as managing the connections and the devices and seeing those devices that are on your network. Because at the end of the day, these devices are on your network, and your end customers are going to come to you as a first line of complaint if there's a problem with how the service is functioning. So it's very useful for things like this to see that and use the analytics that are generated. So why Ribbon? Ribbon has a lot of things going for it. Large installed base of products across many different customer types across the world. We talked about that earlier. We've got lots of different focus on the small, independent, rural space. Lots of customers out there that use our products of one type or another, and we've got lots of experience and a dedicated sales staff to focus on those types of customers. Lots of products in our portfolio, products and solutions. When you talk about UCaaS and our cloud-based services, those are more of a solution. But we really feel like, especially with our acquisition of ECI and allowing us to get into the packet optical space, we really do have a very strong end-to-end portfolio of solutions, everything from the customer's prem all the way to the core of the network. We have sales and marketing programs that can help you be successful in selling services and getting into the voice space, so that, if you have folks that want to understand how to sell and what's been successful with other customers and what types of collateral work best, we've got programs and support folks that can help your sales and marketing folks be successful. We're very innovative in expertise. I didn't mention, but we have something like 800 different patents with the company, and we're very innovative, as you can see, with a lot of our products that we have. So things like cloud-based technologies and the as-a-service type service offerings and the analytics offerings. We're focused very much on trying to use those types of capabilities and to drive out cost, to increase revenue, and to help service providers come to market with new products and new technologies quickly. And then obviously with our heritage of carrier grade, we have very high solution reliability, performance, and functionality. That's one of the benefits that we've inherited from the companies that we've taken over, is our products are 99.999% carrier grade, meaning we design for and strive for lots of reliability and performance from all of the products and services that we offer. Okay. So folks, if you have any additional information, or ideally if you want to talk to us, Lance mentioned earlier that we will be at the upcoming show the first week of March, but I'll leave this chart up here for contact information for both Elizabeth and Jamie. If you guys do have questions, or if you want to follow up and have more detailed discussions on anything that we've talked about, here's the folks you can reach out to, and I know that they'll be more than happy to talk with you and engage you however you guys see fit, or whatever your requirements are.